Phil, I hope you're having a great afternoon. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Things are going extremely well, and I hope you are having a great day as well.
No doubt, and it's always good we can talk some college football. Let me start for the process, because the amount of hours that you put in the book, certainly if you read the book and the publication, you reflect on the hours that you spend. But walk us through the process of how you arrive to the conclusion and the publication.
Well, the whole thing starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and it's a 3 right-through process for the magazine. There are 130 teams, and we begin the first right-through process the Sunday after Thanksgiving. That usually takes all of December and through a good portion of January. And what we do is we look at the postseason write-up is what it is, and we get a service that sends us the stories for each and every team all season long. You read through every single story that was written about the team all year. It really gives you a good flavor. Replays the season in your head, replays the positions in your mind. You can tell when the injuries hurt the position, when the team matured at a position. Gives you a real good outlook on it. And then you can see who's gone for next year, who's back, and come up with your prediction for that position. Then the second right-through process begins at the start of March. And what we do is all of March and April, go through all the pre-spring stuff that the schools send you, update your rosters, who's left the team unexpectedly, put in the freshman recruiting classes, and re-look at each position. And, now that they've signed 3 of the top freshmen out of high school or brought in this JUCO at the position, are they stronger? Or since this kid unexpectedly transferred sometime in February, is this unit weaker than what you thought? And then the third right-through is the post-spring, and that's after spring practices are over. I try to watch each and every spring game. In fact, do watch each and every spring game that's on TV, and, of course, read about them if they're not, get all the latest post-spring updates. And the fourth process of it is to actually talk to the coaches, and I try to fit as many coaches in there as possible. That really gets your roster into the right spot for the magazine. And the one thing, Ryan, is in the magazine business, the whole thing is you've got to come out first, has always been the axiom. Be the first on the newsstands. People will buy the first thing they see that's football. Second, they'll buy it again. Third, they'll buy it again. Then they probably reach their fill of the magazines. Well, we're different here. People wait for the Phil Steele magazine because, A, the information's better. We put the information out June 1st. Our last page goes to the press. The other guys, to get to the press like they do now, so that they're at the newsstands at the end of May, they actually have to be going out prior to 2-3 weeks prior to the end of spring practice for teams, whereas we wait until a good month after each team's spring practice is over. And the second part is, once you get a Phil Steele preview in your hands, then you're going to make sure you go get another one the next year. You need to have that magazine every year. So the fact we come out later than everybody else does not affect our sales at all.
353 pages of the Phil Steele publication when you look at the magazine. And, Phil, I tell you this every single year, and it's not because I've got you on the air. I literally use it in my studio every day. I rarely do a radio interview without it close because I can flip through. And a little wink, wink, you always make me look smarter than I really am. I mean, I can go here and go, well, hey, North Carolina's got 5 starters on offense, 7 on defense returning. It makes us look a little bit smarter. So I appreciate you helping boost my confidence a little bit with college football nuggets.
I appreciate that, Ryan. And believe it or not, you're not the only one in the media that's told me that. There's a lot of guys out there that say, and, frankly, if I'm doing a show, let's say I do a show in Sunbelt Country, I'm going to have my magazine out. I mean, I wrote this stuff, but you can't remember every name off the top of your head for all 130 teams, so it helps you make very quick, fast references. And, the other beautiful thing about the magazine, Ryan, is, the Internet's along and the Internet's put newspapers out of business, put magazines out of business, but we're actually faster, quicker, look up than the Internet, because if I gave you a 10-question quiz and said, what was the score of a game from 3 years ago for this team? Who was the leading rusher for this team? Who was the all-time career leading passer for this team? You could answer those questions in my magazine in about 20 to 30 seconds, whereas if you went on to 10 different schools' websites and looked up 10 different things, you're probably 60, 70 clicks away from finding the information you need. It'd probably take you about 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, I love it. I keep the little tabs on here. I wish and maybe I'll do that. I'll send you a photo of last year's publication because I bring it in 4 hours a day. I do a college football show, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. 52 weeks out of the year, every day we talk college football in Tuscaloosa, and I've got these little tabs on my magazine, and I can flip. People call in, they talk about Florida, you can flip there. But I love the publication. I just wanted to make sure I give you a fair endorsement of the publication. I love it. Let's work our way to the college football side of things. And the magazine right now, let me also promote this, philsteele.com. You can get more information on how to download the publication if you're looking for your tablet, your iPad, your Kindle, whatever, Nook that you're using. You can find that available, philsteele.com, and get instructions there. But right now on the newsstand, you can find it here in Tuscaloosa at several different locations. Phil Steele publication right now, waiting for your holiday weekend read. Phil, let's work our way to Alabama. Your initial thoughts on the Crimson Tide for the upcoming season?
Well, I picked them 7th in the SEC West, Ryan, and I really think they're in a rebuilding year, and Nick Saban's on the hot seat.
April Fools? Where is this coming here? Because
yeah, it's pretty much status quo for Alabama this year. I look at them defensively, Ryan. I've got the number 6 rated defensive line, best set of linebackers in the country, number 2 DBs. Offensively, I rate them number 2 in the country on the offensive line, number 5 set of receivers, best set of running backs in the country, and an experienced quarterback for once. They also are my number 24 special teams. Then you factor in the schedule. Yeah, I've got them favored in every game. In fact, they're favored in every game in my mind by double digits, with the exception of the opener against Florida State and then the season final at Auburn. Those are the only 2 games that won't be a double-digit favorite, but they'll still be favored. I've got the Tide win them all and making the playoffs.
When you look at Alabama, let's say that Jalen Hurts can improve and get a lot better from a passing perspective. We know what he can do, almost 1,000 yards. We talk about receiving. You look at the depth here at wide receiver, offensive line. You just talked about it, running back. When you look at all this together, could this offense be one of Nick Saban's most dynamic offenses that he's had?
Absolutely, and everything starts the confidence in the quarterback, and the fact that they actually have a returning starter. They're going to have more confidence. Now, Jalen Hurts struggled at the end of last season in the big games throwing the football, but with that receiving core, that offensive line, and that run game that you may have to sell out to stop, I think Jalen Hurts hits some big plays this year, gains his confidence level, and greatly improves upon last year's numbers. And last year's numbers weren't too bad for a first-year starter, hitting 63% of his passes with a 23-9 ratio. So I think they can get to that level of being one of the most explosive ever.
How big of a drop-off on the defensive side of the football do you expect?
Not a big one at all. Like I said, defensively, I've got all 3 units rated towards the top, and it's pretty much status quo for Alabama. You go back to last year, they had 5 returning starters, allowed just 13 points per game. This year, 5 returning starters, and 3 years ago, 5 returning starters. So they always lose talent to the NFL each and every year. Now, interestingly, on page 43 of the magazine, I have a projected stats page, and this isn't just some out-of-the-blue thing. What it does is it takes all my sets of power ratings and then plays them into the schedule, who you're playing, how strong they are. So Alabama last year allowed 262 yards per game. This year I'm calling for them to allow 279 yards per game. The points per game will go up. I've got them going from 13 to 17, but that's more a little bit of a reflection of the offenses they're taking on, like a Florida State out of the box and some other potent offenses, as well as an Auburn that should have an improved offense. But overall, statistically, not much of a drop-off at all for that defense.
But, you look at that, and I just flipped there quickly to page 43 as you were talking about projected stats. When you look at Alabama, one of the things that jumps out to me, you've got 270 on offensive rush, offensive pass, you've got 255. That is a almost balanced team, and really that's a nightmare for opposing defensive coordinators if you can maintain that balance with pass-run options.
Yeah, like I said, when you've got the number 2 rated offensive line in the country and the number 1 set of running backs, if I'm a defensive coordinator, my main goal has got to be to stop the run, because you can't let a team just run the football down your throat. That means your extra deep safety is going to be sneaking up to the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden you've got one-on-one coverage on 3 receivers down the field. You're going to have some open plays and big plays for touchdowns, and I think that's where the numbers come into play.
Phil Steele right now, college football publication that's on your newsstand right now waiting for you. Let me take an article that I know that you're affiliated with, ESPN Insider Behind the Wall. There was an article a couple of days ago with Adam Rittenberg, and he wrote an article and said, who is the biggest threat for Alabama in the future? Let me localize that and talk about just the league here with Adam Rittenberg's article on ESPN. Who do you see as the biggest threat for Alabama in the SEC in 2017?
This year, I think the biggest threat is actually the Auburn Tigers. Now, granted, a couple years ago, Auburn came into the season, Jeremy Johnson, best quarterback SEC, Jeremy Johnson, Heisman Trophy frontrunner. Jeremy Johnson's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and things collapsed, and Auburn did not do well. But I think with Jarrett Stidham, they do have a legitimate QB. Petway and Johnson in the backfield are solid. The offensive line looks good. They've got some weapons at receiver. And defensively, that's where I think you see the biggest improvement. 7 starters are back on the defense side of the ball. They played well last year, but I think they're going to improve again this year. After giving up 362 yards per game last year, this year I think they cut that down by probably 20, 25 yards per game. So it's a good, talented team. They do get the big game against Alabama at home. It's a rivalry game, so that's why I think they're the biggest threat. LSU I would have had up there, but remember they wrangled that Florida home game last year? Well, now they have to pay the price. How about 5 SEC road games, including traveling to Florida? So out of the West, the biggest contender to me is Auburn. And out of the East, I actually think there is a legitimate threat in Florida. When I look at Florida, they're a team that last year suffered some big-time defensive injuries at the end of the year. And this year, Florida's going to benefit from that. They only have 5 returning starters, but a guy like Jabari Zaninga started out last year, or only had 5 starts due to those injuries as a freshman. How about 5 sacks? I think he'll be one of the better pass rushers in the SEC. And really, if you look at Florida, their weakness has been offense. That's going back to when Will Muschamp was the head coach. And the quarterback play has struggled. I think this year they're in their best shape. They've got a solid offensive line. They've got their best set of receivers in 5 to 10 years. They've got a running back core that's got 3 capable guys in Scarlett, Thompson, and Pirine. And then you look at quarterback. Felipe Franks is 6'6", 220, cannon for an arm. They've got Luke Del Rio, who began last year as a starter and did extremely well. And then they add in a Malik Zaire as well. I think they're good at that position. And then you factor in the schedule. This year, when you look at Florida's 3 road games, they have 3. They're against Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina. All 3 of those are very much winnable. They have 2 neutral site games, Michigan in the opener, a team where Michigan's very inexperienced, only 5 returning starters. Florida's got 14. You want to play an inexperienced team first game of the season. And then the other one is Georgia. They've beaten Georgia 3 straight years. They get that game in a neutral site. So add it all up, I think Florida will give Alabama a battle in the SEC title game. In fact, Florida is my number 1 surprise team in the country this year. And last year, my number 1 surprise team, or non-top 10 team that I think can contend for it all, was the Washington Huskies, which, of course, made the playoffs.
You know, when I look at talent-wise, I'm talking about a sleeping giant in Texas A&M. I don't know if they can get there in 2017, but I look at everything that program has when you talk about talent, recruiting base, facilities, plenty of money. When is Texas A&M going to wake up and get past 8-5?
Well, they got to do it this year, or Kevin Sumlin is not going to be the head coach next year. His AD has pretty much come out and said that already. And, for ESPN Insider, I'm writing an article right now for Coaches on the Hot Seat. I'll have that released, or ESPN.com, I should say. I'll have that one. And Kevin Sumlin is definitely right there towards the top of those rankings. So when I look at A&M, they are talented. They have teased their fan base each of the last 4 years. I mean, they got as high as number 7, number 6, number 9. Last year they were in the playoff mix. They were the number 4 team in the first playoff committee vote, and yet they finished number 18, unranked, and unranked. There's talent there, but can they put it all together for an entire season? That's going to be the big question. And I think Kevin Sumlin is on the hot seat this year. When
you look at Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley taking over, how does that affect your projections?
It doesn't affect them at all because of the timing of when it happened. Generally, when you get a first-year head coach in, he has to learn the player's strengths and weaknesses. Players have to learn new schemes. There's a big learning curve there. Also, you have to do things for the first time. Go through your first spring practice. What kind of drills do you do? And there's a lot of stuff to get ready for the upcoming season. Well, Bob Stoops took them through the spring drills. So there's no question marks there. They had a veteran guy for the spring drills, veteran guy for the post-spring interviews, and to get their summer work all set up. Basically, Lincoln Riley, who's been the offensive coordinator, will continue to be the offensive coordinator, stays there. Defensively, they got Mike Stoops back as a defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of stability. The only change is at the top, but most of the things have been set in place already for the season. So I think they're just going to do well, and they'd still be my pick for the Big 12 had I known that Lincoln Riley was going to be the head coach or not.
Phil Steele, 042 there on the Twitter account. Find him on the Twitter account. A lot of great nuggets happening there. You can connect with all the things that he's doing. PhilSteele.com, ESPN Insider, The Wall, Behind the Wall, those type of articles. Let me ask you quickly about Dabo and Clemson. What's life like after Deshaun Watson?
You know, I think they have the potential to still win the ACC. And, in fact, you look at their schedule and you go to where they are in Vegas right now as far as the individual games. Clemson's not an underdog in a single game this year. Clemson, defensively, the last 2 years has had just 3 and 4 returning starters. And each time they still fared well. How about 313, 311 yards per game? Well, this year they have 7 returning starters on defense, the best defensive line in the country. My number 12 set of linebackers, number 15 DBs, they're going to be dangerous. And offensively, you know, I've got my number 5 rated offensive line in the country, number 7 set of receivers. The question marks are in the backfield. I think the running back situation's easily handled. Wayne Gallman only had 1,133 yards, 4.9 yards per carry. I think Feaster, Fuller, Choice will easily top those totals. The quarterback situation's a big key, but they get Auburn at home. They get Florida State at home. And in both games, they're favored right now in Las Vegas. They do have to play Virginia Tech on the road, NC State on the road, but I think they have the potential to get back there because they get that big game against Florida State at home on November 11th.
Final question, I promise. I could talk to you all afternoon, and I know you've got other obligations. But let me ask you, and we'll try to get you back on maybe in August to promote the magazine again right before college football kicks off. But as you're looking at Florida State and Alabama, is there a matchup that you're dialed into that this game could be decided? Is it secondary? Is it pass? I mean, how do you look at that game when I know we're a little bit over 60 days away?
Oh, clearly, to me, there's one key matchup in this game, and that's going to be take that Florida State offensive line against that Alabama defensive line. Now, if you base it on what happened last year, Alabama runs all over them because Florida State had trouble protecting DeAndre Francois last year. Francois, when not being sacked, and he was sacked 36 times, when not being pressured, he was getting hit. He was sometimes getting hit after the play. It was unusual how many times they allowed him to get hit after the play, but he kept getting back up. But it was a season where he took so many hits. Now, this year, Florida State does have a much improved offensive line. They've got, their second year for a couple of players that you look at. Rick Leonard is a guy that moved over from the defensive line. They do lose their top 2 OLs, but it's a more experienced unit, should be stronger. They've got to be able to keep that Alabama defensive line off of Francois. If Francois gets hit as many times as he did last year, then Alabama walks away with the win, and that's where I'm going to be watching this game. Florida State offensive line, Alabama defensive line.
Phil, let me give you a chance to promote anything that you need to tie back to the website. I know it's a great place. I hang out there quite often when you talk about information, but promote what you can there and invite people to connect with you.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, Ryan, the magazine has just hit the newsstands, which is always exciting. That's available at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, Walgreens, Target, CVS, Publix. The thing is, it sells out so quick. Make sure you get there. The website is philsteele.com. That's STEELE.com. We are revamping the website, so it's going to look different in a couple of weeks, but it's going to still have the same great information, and nothing better than Phil Steele Plus, which I use myself during the course of the season. The team pages are like having the magazine in front of you, except with updated information, and the numbers are color-coded in green and red. Green for good, red for bad. You can see at an instant the weaknesses and strengths of each team just by looking at your team page on the Phil Steele Plus. And you can follow me on Twitter. That is @PhilSteele042. That's @PhilSteele.